The helicopter thundered through the night sky, carrying its cargo of elite warriors toward their destination. Sarah felt the familiar rhythm of the rotors through the aircraft's hull, a mechanical heartbeat that had accompanied her on dozens of similar missions over the years. The darkness outside was absolute, broken only by the faint glow of instrument panels and the occasional flash of navigation lights. Inside the cramped passenger compartment, 24 operators sat in tense silence. Each man was lost in his own pre-mission rituals and mental preparations. Some checked their weapons for the 100th time, while others stared into the darkness, visualizing the upcoming operation. The weight of their equipment pressed against their bodies, a constant reminder of the tools they would need to survive the next few hours. Sarah occupied the forward seat, her position as mission commander both physically and symbolically separating her from the rest of the team. She could feel their eyes on her occasionally, quick glances that measured her composure and readiness. These men were experts at reading people under stress, and she knew they were looking for any sign of weakness or uncertainty. The helicopter's crew chief held up 5 fingers, indicating 5 minutes until insertion. The signal passed silently through the compartment as each operator made final preparations. Weapons were charged, night vision goggles were tested, and communication systems received last-minute checks. Sarah activated her throat microphone and conducted a final radio check with each squad leader. The responses came back crisp and professional, confirming that all systems were functioning properly. Despite their personal reservations about her leadership, these men were too professional to let equipment failures compromise the mission. 2 minutes, the crew chief announced over the intercom. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, a small clearing in the mountainous terrain that would allow them to insert without being detected by enemy forces. Through her night vision goggles, Sarah could see the landscape rushing past below them. The mountains of Afghanistan stretched endlessly in all directions, a harsh and unforgiving environment that had claimed the lives of countless warriors throughout history. Tonight, it would serve as the backdrop for another chapter in the ongoing struggle against terrorism. The helicopter touched down with barely a whisper, its skilled pilots maintaining the delicate balance between speed and stealth that kept special operations teams alive. The crew chief lowered the rear ramp, and the SEALs flowed out into the darkness like a trained organism, each man moving to his predetermined position in the formation. Sarah was among the first out, establishing the command element while her squad leaders organized their teams. The night air was cold and thin at this altitude, carrying the scent of rock dust and sparse vegetation. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of the helicopter's engines as it departed to orbit at a safe distance, ready to return for extraction. The team moved out immediately, following a predetermined route through the rocky terrain. Navigation was by GPS and compass, with point men using night vision to avoid obstacles and potential ambush sites. The march to the target area would take approximately 3 hours, allowing them to reach their assault positions before dawn. Sarah positioned herself with the command element, maintaining communication with all 3 squads while monitoring their progress toward the objective. The terrain was challenging, requiring careful movement to avoid loose rocks that could betray their position to enemy sentries. Master Chief Rodriguez led the advance element, his decades of experience evident in the way he guided the team through the most difficult passages. His movements were fluid and confident, demonstrating the kind of tactical expertise that came only through countless similar operations. As they moved deeper into enemy territory, Sarah found herself thinking about the men following her into combat. Each had volunteered for this mission despite their personal doubts about her leadership. They were risking their lives not out of loyalty to her, but out of commitment to their duty and to each other. The first 2 hours passed without incident, but Sarah remained constantly alert for signs of enemy activity. Intelligence reports suggested that the compound maintained regular patrols in the surrounding area, and contact with hostile forces was a constant possibility. At 0430 hours, the team reached the observation point overlooking their target. The compound lay spread out in the valley below them, exactly as it had appeared in the satellite photographs. Security lights illuminated the main buildings, while armed guards moved slowly around the perimeter. Sarah studied the target through her binoculars, counting visible sentries and noting any changes from the intelligence briefings. The compound appeared to be on normal alert status, with no indication that their approach had been detected. Alpha Leader to command, came Lieutenant Morrison's voice through her earpiece. Primary sniper position established. Clear fields of fire confirmed on all designated targets. Copy, Alpha Leader, Sarah responded quietly. Report when ready to engage. Similar reports came in from the other squad leaders as they moved into their assault positions. Each element had specific responsibilities, and the success of the operation depended on precise coordination between all units. Captain Henderson led Bravo Squad to their position overlooking the main building. Their role was to conduct the primary assault once the sniper element had eliminated the perimeter guards. Speed and violence of action would be critical to preventing the high-value targets from escaping or destroying valuable intelligence. Charlie Squad, under the command of Lieutenant Williams, moved to positions that would allow them to block potential escape routes and provide backup support to the assault element. Their heavy weapons would be crucial if the enemy attempted to bring vehicles or crew-served weapons into the fight. As the teams settled into their positions, Sarah established her command post on a rocky outcrop that provided clear observation of the entire compound. From here, she could coordinate the assault and make real-time adjustments based on changing tactical conditions. The waiting was always the most difficult part of any operation. Sarah watched the seconds tick by on her watch, knowing that somewhere in the darkness around her, 24 elite warriors were depending on her judgment and leadership. The weight of their lives pressed down on her more heavily than any equipment she had ever carried. At 0545 hours, the first faint traces of dawn began to appear on the eastern horizon. The operation would begin with the rising sun, taking advantage of the brief period when the enemy guards would be silhouetted against the brightening sky, while the SEAL positions remained hidden in shadow. All elements, this is command, Sarah whispered into her microphone. Prepare for execution on my mark. She raised her binoculars and focused on the compound's main gate, where 2 guards stood casually beside a sandbag emplacement. These were her primary concern, as they were positioned to sound an alarm that could compromise the entire operation. Alpha Leader, this is command, Sarah continued. You are cleared to engage primary targets on my command. All other elements stand by. Through her binoculars, she could see Lieutenant Morrison adjusting his rifle position 800 meters away. The shot would be challenging even under perfect conditions, and the mountain winds could easily throw off his aim by several inches. Sarah studied the compound one final time, noting the positions of all visible guards and identifying potential complications that could affect the assault. Everything appeared to match their intelligence reports, but combat had taught her that situations could change in seconds. Alpha Leader, she said quietly, you are cleared hot. Take your shots. The first rifle crack echoed across the valley, followed immediately by a second shot. Through her binoculars, Sarah saw both guards at the main gate collapse simultaneously, victims of Morrison's precise marksmanship. Additional shots followed in rapid succession as other snipers engaged their assigned targets. Within 15 seconds, 6 enemy sentries had been eliminated without raising any alarm. The perimeter was clear for the assault element to begin their approach. Bravo Leader, this is command, Sarah transmitted. You are clear to advance. Execute, execute, execute. Captain Henderson's squad moved immediately toward their objective, flowing across the open ground with practiced efficiency. Their movements were swift but controlled, each man covering his assigned sector while maintaining the formation's overall integrity. Sarah watched the assault unfold through her binoculars, simultaneously monitoring radio traffic from all elements. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned, but she knew that enemy resistance could develop at any moment. The first sign of trouble came from an unexpected direction. Charlie's squad reported movement in a building that intelligence had assessed as unoccupied. Additional enemy forces were present in the compound, more than the 30 to 40 fighters they had anticipated. Command, this is Charlie Leader, came Lieutenant Williams' urgent voice. Multiple contacts emerging from Building 3. Looks like we've got more bad guys than expected. Sarah immediately shifted her focus to the reported area, seeing armed figures moving between buildings in what appeared to be an organized response to the attack. The enemy had reacted faster than anticipated, deploying troops that hadn't been detected during reconnaissance. Alpha elements, this is command, Sarah ordered. Shift fire to Building 3. Suppress enemy movement and protect the assault force. The sniper teams immediately began engaging the newly identified targets, their precise rifle fire forcing the enemy fighters to seek cover. However, the tactical situation was rapidly becoming more complex than the original plan had anticipated. Captain Henderson's voice crackled through the radio with barely controlled urgency. Command, this is Bravo Leader. We're taking fire from multiple positions. Request immediate suppression of enemy automatic weapons. Sarah could see muzzle flashes erupting from windows throughout the compound as enemy fighters opened fire on the advancing SEAL teams. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and she faced the first critical decision of the operation. All sniper elements, this is command, she transmitted. Priority targets are enemy crew-served weapons. Neutralize automatic weapons positions immediately. The long-range marksmen responded instantly, shifting their fire to the most dangerous threats. Sarah watched as enemy machine gun positions were systematically eliminated, their operators falling victim to precisely placed rifle rounds. However, the enemy's initial response had cost the assault force valuable time and momentum. What had been planned as a surprise attack was becoming a pitched battle, with enemy reinforcements arriving from directions that hadn't been covered in the intelligence briefings. Command, this is Bravo Leader, Henderson reported. We've reached the main building, but it's heavily defended. Estimate 15 to 20 fighters inside, and they're not giving up easy. Sarah processed this information while simultaneously tracking the movements of all friendly forces. The enemy was proving more numerous and better organized than anticipated, but the SEAL teams were adapting to the changing tactical situation with the flexibility that made them elite. The sound of explosions echoed across the valley as Charlie's squad engaged enemy forces with rocket-propelled grenades. The heavy weapons were necessary to suppress enemy positions, but they also increased the risk of injuring or killing the high-value targets they were supposed to capture alive. Charlie Leader, this is command, Sarah ordered. Minimize use of explosive ordnance near the main building. Remember, we need those HVTs breathing. The tactical complexity was increasing by the minute. Sarah found herself juggling multiple competing priorities while enemy resistance continued to intensify. This was the kind of situation that separated competent officers from exceptional leaders. Through her binoculars, she observed Captain Henderson's team systematically clearing the main building room by room. Their movements were professional and efficient, but the process was taking longer than planned due to determined enemy resistance. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to movement on the compound's eastern perimeter. A group of enemy fighters was attempting to flank Charlie's squad's position, moving through terrain that would allow them to attack from an unexpected direction. Alpha Leader, this is command, Sarah transmitted urgently. Enemy forces moving to grid coordinates 851437. Approximately 8 fighters attempting to flank Charlie squad. Morrison's response came immediately. Command, this is Alpha Leader. I have visual on the flanking force. Engaging now. Sarah watched through her binoculars as Morrison's rifle spoke repeatedly, each shot claiming an enemy fighter attempting to maneuver against the SEAL positions. His accuracy under pressure was remarkable, justifying his reputation as one of the command's best marksmen. The flanking attack was broken up before it could develop into a serious threat, but Sarah recognized that the enemy was demonstrating tactical sophistication that exceeded their intelligence estimates. These weren't poorly trained insurgents. They were experienced fighters who understood military tactics. Command, this is Bravo Leader, came Henderson's voice again. We've secured the main building and have 2 HVTs in custody. However, we're taking heavy fire from the surrounding structures. We need suppression to execute extraction. Sarah felt a surge of relief at the news that the primary objectives had been captured alive. However, getting them out safely would require careful coordination and continued suppressive fire from the Overwatch elements. Roger, Bravo Leader, Sarah replied. Maintain position and prepare for covered withdrawal. Alpha and Charlie elements will provide suppression. She immediately began coordinating the complex extraction process, directing sniper fire against enemy positions while organizing the movement of the assault force back to the extraction point. The enemy was responding aggressively to the capture of their leaders, making the withdrawal more dangerous than the initial assault. The radio crackled with reports from all three squads as they began the fighting withdrawal from the compound. Enemy fire intensified as the SEALs pulled back, forcing them to bound from cover to cover while maintaining security around the captured high-value targets. Sarah found herself making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Each order she gave affected the lives of her subordinates, and the weight of command pressed down on her with crushing intensity. Alpha Leader, this is command, she ordered. Shift fire to Building 2. Enemy forces are attempting to set up a heavy machine gun position. Morrison's immediate response demonstrated the kind of trust that develops under fire. Despite his earlier doubts about her leadership, he was now following her tactical directions without question, recognizing that her battlefield assessments were accurate and timely. The extraction continued for 20 agonizing minutes as the SEAL teams fought their way back through increasingly hostile territory. Enemy resistance seemed to materialize from every direction, forcing constant adjustments to their movement plans. Sarah coordinated the complex tactical puzzle while maintaining constant communication with the extraction helicopter. The aircraft was orbiting nearby, ready to move in for pickup once the teams reached the designated landing zone. Command, this is Charlie Leader, came Williams' voice through heavy breathing. We're at the secondary rally point. Both HVTs are secure and ready for extraction. The relief in his voice was evident, but Sarah knew they weren't safe yet. The journey to the extraction point would require continued coordination and suppressive fire to prevent enemy forces from intercepting them during the vulnerable helicopter pickup. As the teams consolidated at the rally point, Sarah prepared to implement the final phase of the operation. The most dangerous moments were often during extraction, when troops had to expose themselves to board aircraft while enemy forces attempted to disrupt the process. The helicopter appeared over the ridgeline exactly on schedule, its skilled pilots navigating through the treacherous mountain terrain with remarkable precision. The extraction would require split-second timing to minimize the aircraft's exposure to enemy fire. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline that accompanied the conclusion of successful operations. Her tactical decisions had proven sound under pressure, and her subordinates had responded with the professionalism that made them elite warriors. The test of combat had begun to change the dynamics between Sarah and her team. Respect in the special operations community was indeed earned through performance under fire, and the first phase of that earning process was now complete. The extraction helicopter descended toward the rally point with mechanical precision, its rotors whipping dust and debris into swirling clouds that obscured the landing zone. Sarah watched from her command position as her teams prepared for the final and most vulnerable phase of the operation. Captain Henderson's voice crackled through her earpiece with professional urgency. Command, this is Bravo Leader. We've got enemy forces massing approximately 400 meters to our north. Looks like they're preparing for a final assault before we can extract. Sarah raised her binoculars and studied the reported area, immediately identifying the threat Henderson had described. At least 20 enemy fighters were moving through the rocky terrain, their intent clearly to disrupt the extraction and possibly recapture their captured leaders. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. The helicopter needed several minutes on the ground to load personnel and equipment, but enemy forces were positioning to attack during that vulnerable window. Sarah faced a critical decision that would determine whether the mission ended in success or disaster. Alpha Leader, this is command, Sarah transmitted with calm authority. I need immediate suppression of enemy forces at grid coordinates 852441. Danger close to friendly positions. Lieutenant Morrison's response came without hesitation. Command, Alpha Leader. Understood, danger close. Engaging now. Through her binoculars, Sarah watched Morrison's rifle begin speaking with deadly precision. Each shot found its mark among the advancing enemy fighters, forcing them to seek cover and disrupting their coordinated advance toward the landing zone. The helicopter touched down in a storm of dust and noise, its crew chief immediately lowering the ramp for passenger loading. The SEAL teams began moving toward the aircraft in organized waves, maintaining security while preparing for rapid departure. Suddenly, Sarah's attention was drawn to movement in a sector that should have been clear. A group of enemy fighters had managed to work their way closer to the extraction point than anyone had realized, and they were now in position to attack the helicopter with rocket-propelled grenades. The threat was immediate and potentially catastrophic. If the enemy managed to destroy the extraction aircraft, the entire team would be stranded in hostile territory with no immediate means of escape. Sarah had seconds to make a decision that could save or doom them all. Without conscious thought, Sarah grabbed her rifle and sprinted toward a rocky outcrop that would provide a clear field of fire toward the enemy position. Her movement was instinctive, driven by years of training and the absolute necessity of neutralizing the threat before it could develop. Master Chief Rodriguez saw her movement and immediately understood the situation. "Commander, what are you doing?" he shouted over the helicopter noise. Sarah didn't answer, focused entirely on reaching a position where she could engage the enemy rocket team. Her rifle was equipped with the same high-powered optics she had used during countless previous operations, and muscle memory took over as she settled into a shooting position. The range was approximately 600 meters, a challenging but manageable distance given the equipment and conditions. Through her scope, Sarah could see 3 enemy fighters preparing what appeared to be an RPG launcher, their movements indicating they were seconds away from firing at the vulnerable helicopter. Captain Henderson's voice burst through her earpiece with desperate urgency. "Command, we need immediate suppression of that rocket team. They've got a clear shot at the bird." Sarah's world narrowed to the precise calculations required for accurate long-range shooting. Wind speed and direction, target movement, bullet drop compensation, and the natural rhythm of her own breathing all factored into the complex equation that would determine success or failure. Her first shot struck the primary rocket gunner's center mass, dropping him instantly before he could complete his firing sequence. The heavy rifle's report echoed across the valley, announcing her presence to every enemy fighter in the area. The second enemy fighter attempted to take over the weapon, but Sarah's follow-up shot found him before he could shoulder the launcher. Her rifle cycled smoothly, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round with mechanical precision. The third fighter broke cover and attempted to flee, but Sarah tracked his movement through her scope with predatory focus. The shot was more challenging due to the target's erratic movement, but years of training had prepared her for exactly this type of engagement. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as she fired the third shot, watching through her scope as the enemy fighter stumbled and fell among the rocks. The immediate threat to the helicopter had been neutralized, but Sarah knew that more enemy forces were converging on their position. "All elements, this is command," Sarah ordered while maintaining her shooting position. "Expedite loading procedures. We've got additional contacts approaching from multiple directions." The helicopter crew and SEAL teams responded with remarkable efficiency, understanding that their window for safe extraction was rapidly closing. The captured high-value targets were hustled aboard the aircraft under heavy guard, while security teams maintained perimeter watch. Sarah continued engaging targets of opportunity from her position, her rifle finding enemy fighters who exposed themselves while attempting to maneuver against the extraction site. Each shot was precisely aimed and carefully controlled, conserving ammunition while maximizing effectiveness. Lieutenant Morrison's voice came through her earpiece with what sounded almost like admiration. "Command, this is Alpha Leader. Outstanding shooting. You've bought us the time we need to complete extraction." The comment surprised Sarah, coming from a man who had questioned her tactical judgment just hours earlier. Morrison was acknowledging her combat effectiveness in terms that carried significant weight among Special Operations personnel. "Alpha Leader, this is command," Sarah replied while reloading her rifle. "Maintain suppression on the northern approach. We've still got hostiles moving in from that direction." The coordinated fire from all sniper elements created an effective barrier around the extraction site, preventing enemy forces from getting close enough to threaten the helicopter or the loading teams. Sarah felt a sense of professional satisfaction as she watched her tactical plan being executed with precision. Master Chief Rodriguez appeared beside her position, his own rifle ready for action. "Ma'am, we need to get you on that bird. The teams are almost finished loading." Sarah nodded, but continued scanning for targets through her scope. As mission commander, she would be among the last to board, ensuring that all personnel and equipment were safely loaded before departing enemy territory. A new threat materialized from an unexpected direction as enemy fighters attempted to establish a heavy machine gun position on a ridge overlooking the extraction site. The crew-served weapon could devastate the helicopter and ground forces if it became operational. "Alpha elements, this is command," Sarah transmitted urgently. "Machine gun position developing on Ridge 7. Engage immediately before they can bring it into action." The sniper teams shifted their fire to the new threat, but the range was extreme even for their specialized equipment. Sarah realized that her position offered a better angle for engaging the machine gun crew, and she had the best rifle in the team for such a long-range shot. The distance was approximately 900 meters, pushing the limits of effective small arms fire under field conditions. Wind conditions were variable, and the targets were partially concealed behind rocky cover. It was exactly the type of shot that separated expert marksmen from ordinary soldiers. Sarah adjusted her scope for the extreme range and began the careful process of reading wind conditions along the bullet's flight path. The shot would require perfect technique and a measure of luck, but the alternative was allowing the enemy to establish a position that could destroy them all. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that preceded precision shooting. The crosshairs in her scope aligned perfectly with the primary target, a figure attempting to set up the heavy weapon's tripod mount. The rifle's trigger broke cleanly under her steady pressure, launching the carefully aimed projectile across nearly a kilometer of hostile terrain. Sarah maintained her sight picture, watching through her scope as the bullet found its target with devastating effect. The enemy fighter collapsed immediately, his body falling across the partially assembled weapon. Sarah's follow-up shot caught the second man before he could complete the machine gun setup, effectively neutralizing the threat to the extraction operation. "Outstanding shooting, Command," came Captain Henderson's voice through her earpiece. The excitement in his tone was unmistakable, reflecting the kind of professional admiration that Sarah had been seeking since taking command of the team. The helicopter crew chief appeared at her position, shouting over the engine noise. "Ma'am, we need to go now. Intel reports additional enemy forces approaching from the east." Sarah took one final look through her scope, scanning for immediate threats to the extraction. Satisfied that the area was temporarily secure, she gathered her equipment and sprinted toward the waiting aircraft. The helicopter lifted off as soon as she was aboard, climbing rapidly to clear the surrounding ridges and escape the range of enemy small arms fire. Sarah found herself seated among the men she had led into combat, their faces reflecting a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something that hadn't been there before the mission began. Master Chief Rodriguez leaned over to speak above the engine noise. "Ma'am, that was some impressive shooting back there. 900 meters in mountain conditions. That's the kind of shot most people can't make on a calm day at the range." The comment represented more than technical acknowledgement of her marksmanship skills. Rodriguez was extending the kind of professional recognition that meant everything in the special operations community. Respect had to be earned through demonstrated competence under pressure. Lieutenant Morrison caught her attention from across the passenger compartment. His expression was serious, but no longer skeptical. "Commander, I owe you an apology. I had doubts about the 800-meter shot assignments in the original plan. After watching your performance today, I understand why you were confident in those ranges." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with personal validation and everything to do with team effectiveness. Morrison's acknowledgement meant that future operations would benefit from improved trust and communication between team members. Captain Henderson approached her position as the helicopter continued its flight toward the forward operating base. His manner was respectful in a way that contrasted sharply with his attitude during the pre-mission briefings. "Ma'am," Henderson said, "I want to formally acknowledge your leadership during today's operation. Your tactical decisions were sound, your fire support was outstanding, and you demonstrated the kind of combat effectiveness that this team respects." The words carried enormous weight coming from Henderson, whose opinion influenced the attitudes of every operator in the unit. Sarah recognized that she had crossed an important threshold in earning the acceptance she had sought since taking command. "Thank you, Captain," Sarah replied. "But today's success belongs to every man on this team. Professional competence and teamwork made the difference when the tactical situation became complex." Her response demonstrated the kind of leadership maturity that resonated with experienced operators. Sarah was claiming responsibility for mission success while crediting subordinates for their contributions, exactly the balance that effective commanders maintained. The debriefing began even before they reached the base, with squad leaders providing preliminary reports on their observations and recommendations for future operations. The tone of these discussions was notably different from the pre-mission briefings, characterized by mutual respect rather than skeptical compliance. The enemy force was significantly larger than intelligence estimated, reported Lieutenant Williams from Charlie Squad. But the command and control was excellent. Real-time tactical adjustments kept us ahead of their responses. Sarah listened to the feedback with professional interest, noting areas where improvements could be made while acknowledging the aspects of the operation that had succeeded beyond expectations. Continuous learning was essential for maintaining effectiveness in special operations. As they approached the landing zone, Sarah reflected on the events of the past 24 hours. She had faced the ultimate test of combat leadership, making life and death decisions under extreme pressure while earning the respect of subordinates who had initially doubted her qualifications. The mission's success would be measured not just in captured high-value targets or prevented enemy attacks, but in the transformation of team dynamics that would affect all future operations. Sarah had proven herself through demonstrated competence rather than demanding acceptance based on rank or credentials. The helicopter touched down at the forward operating base as the sun reached its zenith, marking the end of an operation that had lasted less than 12 hours but had changed fundamental relationships within the team. Sarah stepped off the aircraft knowing that she had finally earned what she had sought for months: the genuine respect of her subordinates. The captured high-value targets were immediately transferred to intelligence personnel for interrogation, while the SEAL team began the detailed debriefing process that would extract every possible lesson from the operation. These sessions were critical for maintaining the unit's effectiveness and preparing for future missions. Master Chief Rodriguez found Sarah during a break in the debriefing process, his expression reflecting the kind of serious respect that she had rarely seen directed toward her. "Ma'am, I've been in this business for 23 years, and I've served under a lot of different commanders. What you did out there today, that was leadership." The statement was perhaps the highest compliment Sarah could have received from a man whose opinion carried such weight among the enlisted personnel. Rodriguez was acknowledging not just her combat skills, but her ability to make effective decisions under pressure while maintaining the welfare of her subordinates. "I appreciate that, Master Chief," Sarah replied. "This team performed exceptionally today. The success belongs to everyone who contributed to the mission." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Yes, ma'am, but leadership made the difference when things got complicated. The boys know that now. They'll follow you anywhere." As the day progressed and final reports were completed, Sarah found herself surrounded by men who now viewed her as a proven combat leader rather than an unwelcome addition to their ranks. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, evident in the way they addressed her and included her in their informal discussions. The mission had been a complete success by any measure. 2 high-value targets had been captured alive, significant intelligence had been recovered, and the entire team had returned without serious casualties. More importantly for Sarah's long-term effectiveness, she had earned the kind of respect that would make future operations more efficient and successful. Lieutenant Morrison approached her during the final debriefing session, carrying his rifle case and wearing an expression of professional admiration. "Commander, I wanted to personally thank you for the fire support during extraction. Those shots you made saved the mission and probably some lives." The acknowledgement from Morrison was particularly meaningful, given his initial skepticism about her tactical judgment and marksmanship abilities. Sarah recognized that earning his respect would have significant influence on how other team members viewed her leadership. The team's coordinated fire was what made the difference, Sarah replied. Individual shooting is just one element of effective tactical operations. Morrison smiled slightly, recognizing both her modesty and her understanding of how special operations teams function most effectively. Yes, ma'am, but sometimes one person has to step up and make the shots that count. You did that today. As the debriefing concluded and personnel began preparing for the return flight to main base, Sarah reflected on the fundamental changes that had occurred during the operation. She had faced the most demanding test of military leadership and emerged with the respect and confidence of her subordinates. The challenges that had seemed so overwhelming during the pre-mission briefings now appeared manageable in the context of proven combat effectiveness. Sarah understood that respect in the special operations community was indeed earned through performance under fire, and she had successfully completed that crucial test. Captain Henderson found her as they prepared to board the transport aircraft for the return journey. His manner was now characterized by the easy professionalism that marked effective command relationships. "Ma'am," Henderson said, "I want to apologize for any doubts I may have expressed before the mission. Today proved that you belong here and that this team is in good hands under your leadership." The apology was both unnecessary and deeply appreciated, representing the kind of professional maturity that made Henderson a valuable subordinate. Sarah recognized that their future working relationship would be built on mutual respect rather than reluctant compliance. "No apology necessary, Captain," Sarah replied. "Healthy skepticism about new leadership is professional, not personal. What matters is how we perform when it counts." As the transport aircraft lifted off for the return flight, Sarah found herself surrounded by teammates rather than skeptical subordinates. The mission had transformed not just her relationship with these men, but her own understanding of what effective leadership required under extreme circumstances. The operation would be remembered as a tactical success, but its true significance lay in proving that competence and courage could overcome any barrier to acceptance in the elite world of special operations. Sarah had earned her place through demonstrated ability rather than demanding it through rank or regulation. In the days that would follow, word of the mission's success and Sarah's performance would spread throughout the special operations community. The story of the female commander who eliminated 12 enemies in 5 minutes would become part of the informal legend that shaped attitudes and expectations within the elite units. But, for Sarah, the most important victory was not the tactical success or the recognition it would bring. The real triumph was the transformation of a group of skeptical warriors into a cohesive team that trusted her judgment and followed her leadership without reservation. That was the foundation upon which all future successes would be built. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters as Commander Sarah Chun walked through the corridors with measured steps. Her boots echoed against the polished floors, each sound a reminder of the weight she carried on her shoulders. At 34 years old, she had achieved what many thought impossible for a woman in the elite world of Navy SEALs. The whispers followed her everywhere she went. They thought she couldn't hear them, but years of specialized training had sharpened every one of her senses to razor-sharp precision. The comments ranged from barely concealed skepticism to outright hostility, all wrapped in the thin veneer of military courtesy. "Can't believe they put her in charge of Alpha Team," muttered Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb as she passed his office. His voice carried the kind of casual dismissal that had become all too familiar since her promotion 6 months ago. Sarah had earned her position through 15 years of flawless service, countless successful operations, and a sniper record that remained unmatched in the entire command. Her kill-to-shot ratio stood at an incredible 97%, a number that should have silenced any doubters. Instead, it seemed to fuel their resentment even more. The briefing room buzzed with low conversation as she entered. 24 elite operators, the cream of naval special warfare, sat around the polished conference table. These were men who had seen combat in every major theater of operations over the past decade. Each had proven himself under fire, earned his place through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication to the mission. Yet as Sarah took her position at the head of the table, She could feel the subtle shift in the room's energy. Posture straightened, but not out of respect. Eyes avoided direct contact, but she caught the sideways glances and barely suppressed smirks. The message was clear even without words. They were humoring her, going through the motions because regulations demanded it. "Gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "We have a situation developing in the Kandahar province that requires immediate attention." She activated the wall-mounted display, revealing satellite imagery of a compound nestled in the rocky terrain of eastern Afghanistan. The images showed a fortified position with multiple buildings, guard towers, and what appeared to be significant defensive positions. Intelligence indicates this facility is being used as a coordination hub for insurgent activities throughout the region. Our sources suggest they're planning a major offensive against coalition forces within the next 72 hours. Captain Roy Henderson, a veteran with 18 years of service, shifted in his chair. His expression remained neutral, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs of disagreement. The slight tightening around his eyes, the way his jaw set just a fraction harder than usual. "Ma'am," Henderson said, his tone carefully measured. "With respect, wouldn't this be better suited for an airstrike? Seems like we'd be putting a lot of good men at risk for what amounts to a bombing target." Sarah had anticipated this response. It was the same pattern that had emerged in every briefing since her promotion. Not direct insubordination, nothing that could be formally challenged, but a constant stream of questions designed to undermine her authority and judgment. "That was considered, Captain," she replied calmly. "However, intelligence believes there are several high-value targets in the compound, including 2 individuals on our most wanted list. Dead terrorists tell no tales. We need them alive for interrogation." She clicked to the next slide, showing detailed floor plans of the main building. Red markers indicated suspected enemy positions, while blue arrows traced potential approach routes. The compound is heavily fortified, but our reconnaissance has identified several weaknesses in their perimeter security. The operation will require precision timing and expert marksmanship to neutralize sentries without alerting the main force. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the team's primary sniper, leaned forward in his chair. His reputation for long-range shooting was well established, though Sarah knew his record paled in comparison to her own. Still, he commanded respect among the men in a way that she had never been allowed to achieve. "What's the engagement range looking like?" Morrison asked, directing his question to the room in general rather than specifically to Sarah. "Primary sniper position will be approximately 800 meters from the compound," Sarah responded, ignoring the slight. "Secondary positions at 600 and 400 meters to provide overwatch and backup." Morrison nodded slowly, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. 800 meters was a challenging shot under the best circumstances. In the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan, with variable winds and extreme temperature fluctuations, it would test even the most skilled marksman. "Ma'am," Morrison said carefully, "that's a hell of a shot to make in those conditions. Maybe we should consider moving the primary position closer, reduce the risk of missing a critical target." The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah understood the subtext perfectly. Morrison was questioning her assessment of the tactical situation, essentially suggesting that she lacked the expertise to properly evaluate the shooting conditions. The 800-meter position provides optimal concealment while maintaining clear fields of fire on all primary targets, Sarah explained, her voice remaining professionally neutral despite the growing tension in the room. Moving closer would expose the sniper to unnecessary risk and reduce the overall effectiveness of the Overwatch element. Master Chief Petty Officer David Rodriguez, the senior enlisted man on the team, spoke up from the back of the room. His weathered face bore the scars of 23 years in special operations, and his opinion carried significant weight among the men. "Commander," Rodriguez said, using her title with just enough emphasis to make it clear he was doing so reluctantly. "Some of us have been working together for years. We know each other's capabilities, trust each other's judgment. No disrespect intended, but this team has never operated under your direct command in combat." The statement was carefully crafted to sound like a reasonable concern rather than an outright challenge to her authority. But Sarah recognized it for what it was, a test. Rodriguez was probing to see how she would handle dissent within the ranks, whether she would back down or assert her command presence. Master Chief, Sarah replied, meeting his gaze directly. I understand your concerns about team cohesion. However, every operator in this room has been thoroughly briefed on my background and capabilities. My service record speaks for itself. She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. That said, I'm not asking anyone to take my competence on faith. This mission will require every man to perform at his absolute best. If anyone has doubts about the command structure or the operational plan, now is the time to voice them. The challenge was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah was forcing them to either formally object to her leadership or accept it and move forward with the mission. It was a calculated risk, one that could either establish her authority once and for all or create an irreparable rift within the team. Captain Henderson exchanged glances with several other officers before responding. No formal objections, ma'am. We'll execute the mission as planned. The words were correct, but the tone suggested anything but enthusiasm. Sarah recognized that she had won the immediate confrontation, but the underlying tensions remained unresolved. These men would follow her orders because military discipline demanded it, not because they believed in her leadership. As the briefing continued, Sarah outlined the detailed timeline for the operation. The team would insert via helicopter at a landing zone approximately 5 kilometers from the target compound. From there, they would proceed on foot through the mountainous terrain, establishing observation posts and preparing for the coordinated assault. The mission called for a three-pronged approach. Alpha Squad would provide sniper overwatch from the primary position, neutralizing sentries and providing long-range support. Bravo Squad would assault the main building from the north, while Charlie Squad secured the perimeter and prevented any attempted escapes. Insertion is scheduled for 0200 hours, Sarah explained, indicating the timeline on the display. That gives us approximately 4 hours of darkness to reach our positions and conduct final reconnaissance before the assault begins at first light. Lieutenant Morrison raised his hand slightly. Ma'am, what's the backup plan if weather conditions affect visibility? Mountain fog can roll in pretty quickly in that region. It was a legitimate tactical question, but Sarah sensed the underlying implication. Morrison was subtly suggesting that she might not have considered all the variables that could affect the mission's success. Weather reports indicate clear conditions through the operational window, Sarah responded. However, each squad will be equipped with thermal imaging gear in case of reduced visibility. Additionally, we'll have drone overwatch providing real-time intelligence and target identification. She advanced to the next slide, showing detailed photographs of the compound's key personnel. The images had been captured by reconnaissance drones over the past several weeks, providing clear identification of primary targets. These are our high-value targets, Sarah continued. Ahmad Nazir, suspected of coordinating attacks against coalition supply convoys. Hassan al-Rawi, believed to be the primary explosives expert for the regional insurgency. Both men are considered extremely dangerous and are to be taken alive if at all possible. The photographs showed 2 middle-aged men with distinctive features that would make identification relatively straightforward. Nazir bore a prominent scar across his left cheek, while al-Rawi had a distinctive gray beard and walked with a noticeable limp. Master Chief Rodriguez studied the images carefully before speaking. What's the intel on their security detail? These guys don't usually travel light. Reconnaissance suggests a force of approximately 30 to 40 insurgents, Sarah replied. Most appear to be lightly armed with small arms and rocket-propelled grenades. However, we should assume they have access to heavier weapons and are prepared to defend the compound aggressively. The numbers represented a significant challenge for the SEAL team. Even with their superior training and equipment, engaging a force that size would require precise coordination and flawless execution. Any mistakes could quickly turn the operation into a deadly firefight with uncertain outcomes. Captain Henderson leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. 40 hostiles is a lot to handle with our numbers. Are we sure we can't get additional support for this operation? Sarah had anticipated this question as well. The request for additional support was another subtle way of questioning her judgment and suggesting that she was taking unnecessary risks with the team's safety. Command has deemed our current force structure adequate for the mission parameters, she explained. Additional units would increase the risk of detection and compromise operational security. This is precisely the type of operation that SEAL teams are designed to execute. The response was factually correct, but Sarah could see it did little to alleviate the concerns of her subordinates. These men had survived countless dangerous missions by being cautious and questioning decisions that seemed unnecessarily risky. Lieutenant Morrison cleared his throat before speaking again. "Ma'am, what's the extraction plan? Getting in might be the easy part compared to getting out with prisoners in tow." The question highlighted one of the most challenging aspects of the operation. Capturing high-value targets alive meant the team would have to fight their way out while protecting non-combatants and maintaining custody of potentially uncooperative prisoners. Primary extraction will be via helicopter from a landing zone approximately 2 kilometers south of the compound, Sarah explained, indicating the location on the map. The extraction bird will be on station throughout the operation, ready to move in once we signal mission complete. She clicked to the next slide, showing the detailed extraction route. The path led through a narrow valley that would provide some protection from enemy fire but also limited maneuverability for the helicopter. Secondary extraction points have been identified in case the primary zone becomes compromised, she continued. Each squad leader has been provided with GPS coordinates for all alternate sites. The briefing continued for another hour, covering every aspect of the operation from equipment loadouts to communication protocols. Sarah answered each question with professional competence, but she could feel the skeptical undercurrent that ran through every interaction. As the meeting concluded, the operators filed out of the briefing room in small groups, their conversations subdued but animated. Sarah remained behind, organizing her notes and preparing for the individual squad briefings that would follow. Captain Henderson approached her as the last of the men left the room. His expression was serious, but not overtly hostile. Sarah sensed he was choosing his words carefully. "Ma'am," Henderson began, "I want you to know that every man on this team will execute their duties to the highest standard. We're professionals, and we follow orders." The statement was diplomatic, but Sarah understood its implications. Henderson was assuring her of compliance, while simultaneously making it clear that support would be limited to what regulations required. "I appreciate that, Captain," Sarah replied. "I know these men have served with distinction, and I have complete confidence in their abilities." Henderson nodded slowly before continuing. "That said, ma'am, combat has a way of revealing things that briefings and service records can't show. I hope you're prepared for what we might encounter out there." The comment was clearly meant as a warning, though Henderson had phrased it carefully enough to avoid any formal impropriety. He was suggesting that Sarah's leadership would be tested under fire in ways that her previous experience might not have prepared her for. "Captain," Sarah said, meeting his gaze directly, "I've been in combat before. I know what it looks like when plans fall apart, and soldiers have to rely on their training and judgment. I'm confident this team can handle whatever we encounter." Henderson's expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught a flicker of something that might have been surprise. Perhaps he had expected her to back down or show uncertainty in the face of his challenge. "Yes, ma'am," Henderson replied simply. "I'll make sure the men are ready for the individual briefings." As he left the room, Sarah allowed herself a moment to reflect on the conversation. She understood the position these men were in, caught between their personal doubts and their professional obligations. They had been conditioned to follow orders without question, but they had also been taught to think critically about tactics and leadership. The afternoon passed quickly as Sarah conducted detailed briefings with each squad leader. These sessions were more collaborative, focusing on specific responsibilities and coordination requirements. The individual meetings allowed her to address concerns more directly and establish better working relationships with key personnel. Lieutenant Morrison proved to be particularly challenging during his sniper briefing. His questions were technically sound but clearly designed to probe for weaknesses in her tactical knowledge. "Ma'am," Morrison said, studying the terrain maps, "wind conditions in that valley can be pretty unpredictable. Have you had a chance to personally reconnoiter the primary shooting position?" Sarah recognized the trap immediately. Morrison was asking whether she had conducted physical reconnaissance. knowing full well that recent promotion had kept her tied to administrative duties rather than field operations. The position has been thoroughly scouted by reconnaissance teams, Sarah replied. I've reviewed all available intelligence, including wind data, sight lines, and potential complications. Morrison nodded, but pressed further. What's your assessment of the shot difficulty rating? That 800-meter range in mountain conditions. The question went to the heart of Morrison's concerns. He was essentially asking whether Sarah truly understood the challenges he would face as the primary sniper, or whether she was making decisions based on theoretical knowledge rather than practical experience. It's a challenging shot, Sarah admitted frankly. Weather conditions will be critical, and the margin for error is minimal. That's why I'm confident in your abilities to execute it successfully. The response seemed to surprise Morrison slightly. He had clearly expected either overconfidence or uncertainty, not a balanced assessment that acknowledged both the difficulties and his capabilities. As the day progressed, Sarah found herself constantly navigating similar challenges. Each conversation required careful attention to both the tactical details and the underlying interpersonal dynamics. She was simultaneously commanding officer, technical expert, and diplomat, trying to weld together a team that remained fundamentally skeptical of her leadership. The final briefing of the day was with Master Chief Rodriguez, whose opinion carried enormous weight among the enlisted personnel. Rodriguez was a legend in the special operations community, a man who had survived more combat deployments than most operators ever attempted. Commander, Rodriguez said as they reviewed the final operational timeline, these boys are good soldiers. They'll do their jobs regardless of personal feelings. But I want you to know that respect in this community is earned through performance under fire. The statement was both reassuring and challenging. Rodriguez was promising compliance, while making it clear that Sarah's ultimate acceptance would depend on her performance during the actual mission. I understand, Master Chief, Sarah replied. I'm not asking anyone to trust me based on rank or credentials. I'm asking them to judge me by my actions. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. Fair enough, ma'am. I hope you're ready for what's coming. As evening approached, Sarah made her final preparations for the mission. Equipment checks, communication tests, and last-minute intelligence updates filled the remaining hours before insertion. The compound remained active according to drone surveillance, with clear evidence that the high-value targets were still present. The helicopter crew conducted their own briefings, reviewing extraction procedures and emergency protocols. These aviators had worked with SEAL teams countless times before, and their professionalism provided a welcome contrast to the tensions Sarah had faced throughout the day. At 2,300 hours, the team assembled in the equipment bay for final gear checks. 24 elite warriors, each carrying approximately 80 pounds of specialized equipment, prepared for another dangerous mission in the ongoing war against terrorism. Sarah watched as the men conducted their ritualistic preparations. Some checked and rechecked their weapons with obsessive precision. Others sat quietly, mentally rehearsing their assigned tasks. A few engaged in the dark humor that served as a psychological defense against the reality of what they were about to face. The helicopter engine spun up with a deafening roar, filling the night air with the distinctive sound of rotor blades cutting through the darkness. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded combat operations, the heightened awareness that came with crossing the line from preparation to execution. As the team boarded the aircraft, she caught Captain Henderson watching her with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw something that might have been grudging acknowledgement. He was still skeptical, but he was beginning to recognize that she wasn't going to back down or show weakness under pressure. The helicopter lifted off into the darkness, carrying them toward a confrontation that would test everything Sarah had learned about leadership, combat, and the price of earning respect in a world that had never wanted to accept her presence. The real test was about to begin.